So I'm going to have a very quick overview of what I've been doing and why I'm doing it. And first of all, thank you for giving me some space to chat. Confession, I'm not a model maker. As a kid, 60s and 70s, I made, just like any boy, I think, lots of aeroplanes and hung them up on my bedroom ceiling and all of that. But I haven't done any of that since. I'm not a fabricator either, so I don't make stuff. All of the time since has been digital, maths, spatial analysis, software, data, all that kind of stuff. And so I find myself suddenly needing to make something when I don't have the tools and I don't have the background. So what the heck am I doing, and why the heck am I doing it? Two very good questions. I had a thought during middle of the year to make a thing called a rolling ball sculpture. It's not a model, but there are many aspects to it I think you would easily identify with in terms of what you've got to do and how you go about doing it would be exactly the same. If you're going to call it anything, it's kinetic art. So it's an art piece. So it's whatever you want to make it. It's however you want it to be. There are no rules, no expectations, no nothing. Rolling ball sculptures, if you do a search on YouTube, you'll see what I mean. Balls rolling down tracks. Sounds really simple, but when you have a look at them, you'll see they're really mesmerizing. And all of a sudden it's gone from something I haven't been thinking about at all to suddenly, I've got to make one of these. So I go straight into YouTube, have a search, quickly find some quality channels. People have been building these for years, and they sell them for thousands and sometimes many thousands, depending on, of course, how it's made and how big it is. And they end up with quite, substantial, good ways to present them in five-star restaurant, hotels and motels and all that kind of stuff. So they're an interesting, mesmerizing thing to watch. So as I started to look at it, I thought, yeah, that's really cool. Why would I want to make one? And then I saw one that I admired and had beautiful metalwork and quite imaginative tracks. And when you look at the physics of these things, they're really interesting at what you can do. And I noticed one thing that really jarred at me. He had all this beautiful stuff, and then he had this plastic knob that went like that to make the ball lift go faster and slower, depending how fast or slow you wanted the whole thing to go. And I thought, oh no, you can actually make that, I think, a lot more interesting and a lot better than that. So I had an idea, well, that would be really good if you just sort of had something that just waved your hand up and down. Why spoil this beautiful piece of art that you've done, this metalwork and all the work that goes into it, with an ugly plastic knob? No, you can do much better than that. So this germ of an idea started with just that one thing. I guess just like you guys, one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and the doors just keep going. There seems to be no end to it. So I think that would be something that you would find, in common with what I found. And when I went to your exhibition that you had here earlier, there was one thing that stood out. It was the attention to detail in everything that I saw. The paint, the small items, the things that problems you've probably had to solve, and no one would know, but you know that you had to make what you present. And you might have friends who might know the difficulties of what you went through and everything else. That's not a problem. So I had to inspire myself to take on this task of building a kinetic art piece when I don't know how to build anything. So where do I start? All right, problem solving. I've got probably the biggest problem to solve in this is the best place to start, because if I start with the easy stuff and I work all the way through there and I find there's a difficult one, it's a showstopper, then there's been no point, nothing at all. So I start at the hardest part. So given that I set myself the task of let's involve something like a hand gesture and interaction, so that instantly involves two things, electronics and software. Well, I last touched electronics in first year uni, and I didn't much like it. It was pretty dry. It was just calculations of circuits and resistors and capacitors and so on. So I tried to like it, but I couldn't. So I've had no, just like model planes, no touching of that since. But software, definitely. I've spent my whole adult life writing software. It wasn't in my original degree, but it was part of where I went. So I had at least a good toolkit of knowledge that I could draw on to build this thing. All right, so I'm not taking on the impossible, but I don't know how many problems I've got. So well, it starts somewhere. I'll solve the first biggest problem, then I'll go to the next biggest problem and work my way down until finally I'll reach the end where there are no more problems to solve. And I'm not mucking around. I'm not spending 2 years doing this. I've given myself 12 months. My ideal is to set myself up with a display space in Art Walk in the middle of next year. So it's only 6 months from now. I only started this 6 months ago from scratch with nothing. What's that?
Art Walk they have in town.
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to present this thing in a nice display space. I saw a couple of nice venues where they obviously let people do things, and I want a bit of an upmarket presentation because this will be done in carbon fibre and stainless steel, so it'll be expensive materials. It will look good, and I want the right kind of space for it. So that's my time frame. So that means I've got to work. So the first thing I did was get straight into software. 6,000 lines of software I've written from scratch in a language that I hadn't used before, so I had to learn the language as well. So that is quite substantial bit of coding. If you've never done coding, 6,000 lines is busy. But I've got big chunks of important things in there. I've started with the idea of a hand gesture. Then I realized, well, actually you could do more than that. I can have lights and I can have other things happening. I can have things opening and closing. I can actually control quite a few things with just gestures. So I need a bit more than just a sensor that works out where my hand is and what I'm doing. So I need a graphical user interface if I'm going to have options so people can select a couple of things. So I've got a very small touch screen that I'm developing parallel with this that will control those options if you want to use it. You can set it up and just do that and it can do all kinds of wonderful stuff. 1,000 lines of that code is just the graphical. Another 1,000 lines is a programming language that I've created out of thin air for it so that you can personalize it and control it to the nth degree. So just like Apple did with the iPhone, they provided sensors, GPS, accelerometers, cameras, that kind of stuff, made a world where developers could build on those things and create 50,000 diverse things. Same with that. I've built designed a language for it so that I can describe how I want lights to vary, how I want balls to change, what this tracks to be selected, biased one way or the other, all randomized, etc., etc. So I've developed all of that into a single language that I can then package up to a single thing that you can tap on a screen and say, oh, now I want this mood or I want this mood. And in there are the statements to control it. So I've got infinite permutations and possibilities with it. So as you can see, there's been a lot of thought to go into that, but that's the foundation which is going to drive this whole kinetic art piece, which is why I haven't been too worried about creating balls rolling down tracks yet. That comes in the last stage. So I have over there some working bits and pieces. I've had to get up to speed with 3D printing because I'm not a maker or fabricator. I don't have the tools, don't have the knowledge, but I can certainly get into design and 3D parts. So I've been spitting out all the necessary parts to create the first least difficult problem, which is how to get a ball from the bottom to the top. It's a gravity fed system, so you've got to get from there to there somehow. And it's funny, just like you would probably find, you're opening a door and then you're going through it and say, okay, well, what can we do with this? So rather than just be a ball sitting there and just go up with lift, I've decided to throw in a few bits of a lighting bling there. I thought, well, that's going to be a bit of fun. Why be ordinary? Why be boring? Why just have a ball? So I looked at all these guys, then they were doing glass balls and marbles and steel balls. That's fine. I thought, well, why not be a bit extra? Why not go the extra mile? So I've embedded wireless LEDs into these resin balls that I've been building. And these wireless LEDs go through an induction loop and all of a sudden they light up because that's the way electromagnetic induction works. They're tiny coils, tiny little things the size of your fingernail, tiny little coils, and there's a large coil that go through. One produces an alternating magnetic field, induces a current, and the other makes the light go bang. All of a sudden, it's more interesting. But it takes about 5 days to build a ball. So you've got to build a little layer, wait for the resin to set, it takes about 12 hours, put the little LEDs in, and so on and so on and so forth. So just like you guys, there's lots and lots of detail within detail within detail, and that's just to make a ball. So that's the process that I've been going through. Then lately I had the thought, well, that looks okay, but I'm finding that there's a little bit of a blob with the LED, and that's a bit boring. It's just sort of a dark blob, a bit of coil and a bit of plastic housing and so on. So lately I've been putting UV activated paint on it just so that the base glows as well as the top glows. And thought, well, if I'm going to hide the induction coil in such as the 3D printed Stargate, why not hand paint the UV paint on top of that and then run UV lights on that so it lights up as well? So while the ball is just waiting to get lifted up and while it's sort of going from there to there, don't be boring, light up, do something interesting, and then you can go. So here's where I've gone to the second stage of what I've been doing, which is the first stage being proof of concept. Is the electronics going to work? Can I talk to the can I write the software? Can I make it work? Do all the sensors work? Do the motors work? Does everything work the way that it needs to? Yes. So now we're up to the very exciting stage of proof of concept. Proof of concept is, prototyping. So proof of concept, pass, tick, everything works. I can write the code for it. Everything is going to do what I want it to do. And no matter how complex it is, it can be done. So now we're going into the prototyping stage. Prototyping stage is what I'm demonstrating over there. Quite a recent thing. I've only been 3D printing the past few weeks. And the little bit of ugly stuff that I've got over there is just wood. And all I'm doing is I'm just working out where things need to be so I can move things around quickly, where there needs to be critical clearances, angles, supports, and everything else. So that just tells me what I need to have where. In the final version, I will have that done in stainless steel and I'll have decorative supports. It'll be done really nicely, but that's sort of the last 10% of the whole time frame. So over there, what I've got is a demonstration of how the electronics and the software can all work together to create an interactive experience that can drive a kinetic art piece. So that's it in a nutshell. So I've got a very tight time frame. I've only got 6.5 months left. But I am on schedule. I'm running parallel development streams. So I've got lots of hardware over there. The hardware, by the way, is a small computer called a Raspberry Pi. Most of you may know it. Some of you may not. They're a small single board computer, extremely popular with hobbyists and developers and everything else, because in $100 or $30, $130, depending on the configuration, you've got yourself a small single board computer with the ability to run a windowing operating system, with the ability to support multiple languages, but most importantly, 40 pins built in to talk to the outside world. That means not only just voltages and grounds, but also interfaces, so serial interfaces of several different flavors, and GPIO, what they call general purpose input output. So you can put in sensors so that you can drag your hand up and down. There's a sensor there that says, oh, okay, well, we've got this reading. Or you might tell a motor over there to go do that and go that fast. And so all those controls are done through those 40 pins of the Raspberry Pi. So that makes it feasible for very, very low cost, to build a complete, system. So there's quite a lot of parts to this. I've got into 3D printing when I hadn't touched a 3D printer until a few weeks ago. Software, electronics, the whole shebang. I'm hoping that over the next couple of months, I'll build some more subsystems that go together. And then I'll have to buy a very expensive piece of equipment so that I can then start experimenting with metal fabrication and joining. The ultimate goal of the 3D printing is that I'll get all the design files together and then I'll farm them out to a service, say, do that, but make it stainless steel for me. I'm just doing it in cheap plastic at the moment. It's just got to work. I've just got to see it go. That's all it's got to do. So I'm happy to take on any number of questions. I've covered 28 different things there, I know. And I'm happy to demonstrate and talk and come back at any later stage if you want to see future developments of it.
Definitely. Thanks, Alex.